I honestly believe that there will be industries that will be disrupted, and I did a talk recently which quoted a bit of Gartner research about where they're suggesting that by 2030 that 80% of a project manager's role could theoretically be done by an AI augmented piece of software. And for project managers, hearing that statistic, they could go, oh, gosh.
Coming right at you, the PM Cowboy podcast.
Hi, this is your project management cowboy coming right back to you with our next podcast. I'm particularly excited about this topic because everybody's talking about it. We are talking today with an expert on AI. We have the special privilege all the way from Brisbane, Dr. Elissa Farrow, who has extensive real-life experience with a number of different topics. She'll give us a little bit of a lead-in of all the wonderful things she does. But without further ado, hi, Elissa. Welcome on board. I'm so happy that you took time out of your day. You're at a client, so I appreciate your commitment to discussing the topik. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's really great to be here.
Great. A standard question I kind of like to ask a little bit up front, in case, because when people look at these things, they might ask themselves the question, how do these people know each other? Is there some kind of cabal of trainers or consultants that's going on here? No, not really. Where did we meet?
We met in Dubai earlier this year at an international project management conference.
Yeah, exactly. You'd been to the Dubai conference, which is quite an impressive conference a couple times, right? You were a veteran.
Yes. It was my second time there. The first time was my last conference gig just before COVID changed everything in our planet, and this time I got the joy of speaking for 2 days in a masterclass about big data and AI in project management context with about 60 people. It was a really great time.
Funny is I was impressed with your background and with your presentation, and for the longest time this concept of AI has been bothering me because I think there's a lot of potential behind it, but it's been irritating because I just had so many questions about it, right? So this idea of doing this podcast has been around for a long time, and we kept on saying, who do we know who can talk about AI like a PM cowboy or cowgirl. So no nonsense, direct, pragmatic, so that other people understand. In German, we have this wonderful saying: if you understand something, then you have to be able to explain it to a 7-year-old, a housewife, a houseman, or a board member. And you have excellent academic pedigree, which we're going to take a look at what your background is. But I also like the fact that you are no nonsense. You can say things so the rest of us can understand it.
Thank you. Yeah, it comes probably from my original social science background, where the very beginning sort of first job that I had was actually working in the community sector in domestic and family violence prevention and youth work. So I think to be able to sort of translate concepts into ways that every person could understand is something that's really important to my social justice principles.
So you have a doctor, you have a PhD, right?
Yeah.
You want to give us a little bit of a background of where you come from and what wealth of academic knowledge you have?
Yes, certainly. I would call myself a practical futurist. I did my doctoral studies, which I concluded last year, looking at organizational futures and the implications of artificial intelligence on teams, on leaders, on the adaptation approach. That was a bit of a passion area of mine because I had for a long time been curious about doing further study. A long time ago, I did a social science bachelor degree at a university here in beautiful sunny Queensland. And that was because I had a strong interest in making change in my local community. And so the social science that I looked at was looking at a blend of psychology and sociology and neuroscience type topics. But I craved for more. And so then I did a master's that incorporated some policy and planning dimensions And then for quite a number of years, helped organizations set their strategy and then try to adapt to that strategy via portfolios, programs, projects, change and benefits, which is how I got into
by the
that
project
world.
program portfolio bug,
Yes.
which I think makes you totally interesting, that you have a solid, profound background from another area, and that you've joined our community, because I think this diverse background adds so many positive facets that are relevant. Project management, as you know, is not just getting things done, but there's a whole bunch of psychological aspects behind it.
Yeah, I totally hear that.
Yeah. When you studied, what were your first excursions into project life?
Well, a long time ago, for me, I headed up an enterprise portfolio management office. But before I got to that role, which was in a state government organisation, so in Australia, we've got 3 levels of government: federal, state and local government.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the centre layer, which is the state of Queensland.
Wow.
And for me, we used at that point in time Prince 2, managing successful programs, as the sort of 2 primary disciplines. And then we started to move more into sort of agile ways of working and hybrid methodologies as well.
Wow.
Since I've had my own consultancy business, I was realizing that a lot of people and organizations were not super good at enacting change. And even though PMBOK's been around for a really long time, there's still challenges in delivering projects. So I thought, well, if people can't deliver what I would consider more simple projects now, what's going to happen when artificial intelligence comes in and we're shifting whole ways of working, cultures, challenging even the human project manager's place in the delivery model? And I thought that would be something fascinating to explore. And that's what I did my doctorate in, but set all of my research 20 years in the future, which is where the Futurist and foresight methodologies come in, because I thought, well, I don't want to just explore it about today, but what will set us up for the future? So did a lot of participatory work, getting people to creatively visualize the future where artificial intelligence might be their colleague at work, or maybe artificial intelligence might be their boss in the workplace. So it just opened up a whole pile of really fascinating insights with the people that I researched with.
A lot of people, when they think about artificial intelligence, they think of computers, software, systems.
Mm-hmm.
They think maybe of robotics. What was your exposure to artificial intelligence in your studies and also in your initial work?
Yeah, well, for me, it was actually really important to get people to define what it meant for themselves, because a lot of people's definitions of artificial intelligence is
we should take the time and call the bullshit bingo word and say, okay,
totally.
maybe you can give us a pragmatic and understandable understanding of what are we even talking about when we're talking about intelligence, because I think there's different levels of intelligence.
Yeah.
And maybe we can also kind of link that to a roadmap, because I think there's a roadmap ahead of us. I think there's decades and decades of unfolding artificial intelligence income. And I think that what we are just at the precursors. I think a lot of people are already anticipating, I don't know, robots doing all of our work. We're just going to be on vacation or whatever, or extinct or something like that. But I think because this podcast is kind of for business people who are pragmatic and are trying to stay on top of the disruptive nature of our technology, you know.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Do you want to give it a shot and maybe from your perspective give a definition of what are we talking about when we're talking about intelligence before we even get to artificial intelligence? And then I might ask you the challenging question: is artificial intelligence intelligent? But let's start off with a definition of intelligence.
Yeah, let's start with the easy philosophical questions.
Yep.
Hey, Mark, but well, for me, intelligence is as a concept something that is in many domains itself. Like artificial intelligence, for me, I think about intelligence when it comes to emotional intelligence. I think of intelligence as a concept around cultural intelligence. I think about intelligence in the concept of super, let's get a bit geeky type of intellectual forms of intelligence.
But that's highly cognitive, right? That's associative, that's cognitive. That kind of mean
Yeah.
that you're I think
Yeah.
you're going for the goal, for the holy grail of intelligence. I think artificial intelligence is a little far away from that, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think at the moment AI it's a domain of computer science that essentially is emphasizing the creation of intelligent machines that work and react like humans. And so, in the very first paper I wrote in my doctoral studies, I went back 5,000 years. Sounds a bit crazy, doesn't it? But 5,000 years, where we think the consideration about intelligence from early philosophers, earlier civilizations, was something where people started to realize that perhaps there's components of intelligence that could be automated. And even a long time ago, there were forms of very early machine where people were starting to try to make sense of moving parts, often starting with how can we actually augment a human personal body with a form of machine that can actually help enhance the concept of advantage of human work.
My brain is racing. I'm creating links between your various backgrounds, but before I make an assumption about what might link into what you're saying, can you think of a specific example of such a kind of machine?
Yeah. Well, there's a few that actually came from the sort of around Dubai where we were earlier in the year. Amazing it's a hard word to say, automatons, which was essentially like forms of, they didn't have engines in them, but they actually
there was a French movie that had one of those things that you could wind up and
Yes, but some of the very first iterations of that, created by incredible scientists in the sort of Middle Eastern Arabic world, were there for people's entertainment. So you would essentially have people who may not necessarily been in the hierarchy cranking a handle, and then various figures would play music or they would dance, and that was thousands of years ago. And so now, as people invented other forms of combustion engine and other forms of energy utilization, the whole concept of artificial intelligence and robotics can now start to come to the fore, which is why AI and technology is strongly connected to having reliable and accessible forms of energy and electricity to then start to speed up the process and manual processes that we would have seen in early manufacturing days.
Do you know what I thought of when I was listening to you talking, which is, it's great listening to you. You have a strong, and I'm a big fan of organizational development and the theory of organizational development. I think it's something that many of us study in university, and then we never think it has any relevance in our world, but it has so much relevance. I was actually kind of, when I was listening to you, I was kind of realizing that systems, organizational systems, are actually, they're not electronic, they're not robotic, but they are a form of trying to transfer individual intelligence to group intelligence.
Yes.
And I think a lot of us can tell lengthy stories of frustration of how systems often fail to take care of our needs, which I think is maybe something that's also a crossover to artificial intelligence. I think there's a great danger with artificial intelligence. Maybe I'm just being a little bit of devil's advocate. That I think a lot of artificial intelligence, the way it's conceived at a very low level, won't be intelligent. It'll be faster automation.
Yeah.
So
well,
go ahead.
Yeah, one of the considerations that, of course, we have, and it's quite public, is that artificial intelligence will theoretically mirror our own forms of intelligence for a while,
which is,
because
it has to get the intelligence from somewhere, right? This is one of my classical pub speeches. When I'm feeling good and I've had a couple beers, I said, when we're talking about artificial, which I find completely fascinating, I often ask the stupid question, and I think the stupid questions are the best questions. Okay, what is intelligence? Where's it going to get the intelligence from? And there's an underlying assumption here that the mother and father of artificial intelligence, human beings, that we are intelligent. And I think there's plenty of examples of human intelligence, but I think there's lots of examples of quite the opposite.
Yes, yes. I always say thank you to ChatGPT whenever I utilize it, just because I think, well, there's and I know that was a big talk of the town in the beginning of the year, is something that just, incredible sort of utilization and take up within a really, really short period of time. Like, I think it was something that within 2 months, where the latest iteration was launched in, I think, November last year, that in 2 months there was 100 million users of ChatGPT, and it's extraordinary because it's the first time in a long time that these sorts of natural language processing tools are accessible. That even kids at school can get their assignment in draft, hopefully.
It's funny that you mentioned that
GPT, but what does that mean for us?
I agree with you. By the way, when you thank GPT, I think you were saying that metaphorically, right? Or do you actually write?
No,
thank
I
you
say, thank you.
You caught me. It's funny because my initial concerns about AI and whether it was useful or not was kind of overcome when I started playing with ChatGPT about a month ago.
Do you say thank you, Mark?
And I was actually feeling guilty because I'm constantly giving it commands. Give me this, give me that.
No.
I'm like, I grew up typically Texan where you say please and thank you for everything.
Yeah.
So
start doing that.
I was like,
start doing that.
Yeah, I did that a couple times because I felt weird constantly, because I think for anybody out there who doesn't really understand where AI might take us, I think ChatGPT and similar platforms are a great entry point to try it out and to get a feel. I used it for putting together a portfolio management program where I had a list of, I think I had 50 different topics that were going around in my head, and for me to all verbalize them and put them into bullet points would have taken me, I would have burned out halfway through the process. And with ChatGPT, it's great. I put in my prompts. It writes sensational. You might rearrange the bullet points, or you might have a different opinion, or sometimes, ChatGPT, in my opinion, is wrong. But you even have a possibility of putting your reason in there, why you think it's wrong. I think it's a great starting point. But I think also for our listener and also for a big keen interest of mine, ChatGPT is not the totality of what we're talking about with the AI revolution, right?
No, there's many subdisciplines, and this is part of for me, getting people to start to identify what artificial intelligence means. And I certainly had this sort of comment through my doctoral studies. I was saying, what type of AI are you talking about? And for me, because
are there categorizations already for those of us who haven't thought of category? Has there been a discernible, this is, I think, the value of academians. They take the time to sit down and structure things so that you have precise language. Is there a precise categorization of the different types of AI?
Yeah, and growing all the time.
Okay.
So there's 8 different topics, and I'll make sure that we'll show this slide.
We'll put it up
friends.
On the screen. We'll zoom it in.
Yeah. And so some of those are used independently, but then others, like robotics, for example, are used in a blended form. So I'll give you a few of those headlines. So firstly, there's machine learning and language processing. So this is where, again, from the perspective of thinking ChatGPT, it's a form of machine learning, but it's taking natural language and it's making meaning for us, albeit at the moment its data set it's utilizing is 2021. It's not the latest stuff. So something that happened yesterday won't appear necessarily. And ChatGPT says that. It says, I can't tell you about the current events, but I'm only up to this.
I actually think that's cute. Whoever programmed that, I think it's totally cute when you ask them. I asked it recently, how we're all both very familiar with the Standish chaos report and the Gartner group. And I haven't seen any, I don't know if they still do them, but I was looking for the latest statistics and I put it in there and it said, no, I only have data until I think 2019 or something like that. So I thought it was cute
2021. Yeah. So. But other forms, so we've got machine learning, speech and vision. So when you think about machine vision or image recognition, and even things that you'd have in your smartphone, like, from a speech perspective, speech to text or text to speech type options. So artificial intelligence is part of that sort of concept. Sort of robotics, planning and optimization, expert systems, but predominantly AI has a growing number of subdisciplines. And for me, the power that comes is the actual layering of those various modalities and subdisciplines together to form sort of like a supreme sort of offering.
So do you, based on these categories, because I guess we're also at different levels of maturity based on technological advancement. I'm sure, just like I think one of the classic models we can use for this, I mean, we have this industrialization 1.0, 2.0, 4.0, 5.0. I did a speech on 5.0 not too long ago. Can we kind of foresee the same thing with AI?
Well, I think people are debating Ray Kurzweil's predictions that sentience would be here soon. Let's say in the next 10 years that we'd have sentient forms of artificial intelligence.
Do you believe that?
And well, I believe that we may, but we may not know. This is where, again, from my doctoral studies, a lot of the early investment in artificial intelligence came from military sources. So, even think back in World War II, there were challenges in relation to coding and trying to decrypt some of the messages that were being passed around the world at that point in time. And so that was one of the very first early forms of computer that actually helped with starting to shift some of the changes in
that broke the Enigma code.
And there's been great movies in relation to that makeup. But so in the early stages, Defence put a lot of resources into sort of smart technology. They put a lot of resources into robotics. Again, from the perspective of, military is unfortunately one of those areas where a lot of these thought processes happen, and then they
kind of fund the rest of us. It's kind of the research and development pool.
Yeah, which has been such large sort of, sometimes we just got to, work out our comfort level with all of that.
Yeah. But let me get back to this kind of evolution of because I think one of the things that kind of opened up also AI for me, this whole using of ChatGPT, is because of the positive feedback or experience that I had in the process. Wow, this is really a tool that makes my life easier. It can help me aggregate content. It can give me suggestions. It can correct vocabulary and syntax and all that good stuff. Okay, which just makes your life easier. I think another area where AI is getting a lot of hype right now is in the marketing area. I think
in the marketing area, recruitment areas, and also in health.
I'd like to talk about that separate, but I almost think that's for me a more socially valuable topic to talk about. I will say that I have a marketing background, so that doesn't mean I mean to demean marketing, but it's not in the same social value as medical. And I think there's a lot of interesting medical practices there. Let's because I think one of the things we shouldn't avoid talking about also with maybe in context would be, is there a legitimate fear? Since you have a social background also, what social impact could it have? And if we use, for example, so if somebody uses ChatGPT to write an essay or to put together something, I don't think anybody's really concerned that much. Maybe I think universities are concerned because they're afraid that all their students are going to write their essays over ChatGPT. But let's talk about the marketing thing, because if you listen to the hype online, which I love to listen to, but I discount 90% of what I hear on this, is marketing companies are dead. You don't have to any kind of text that you need to write, any kind of my girlfriend who's a doctor told me that one of the pharmaceutical companies she works with they're very proud, and they communicate that they're using AI tools now. They've pretty much gotten rid of their advertising agency, and they do everything in-house, and they do everything with AI. And I said, well, how did you like it? And this is an example of, I think, maturity of AI. She said, it's terrible. She said, the picture, the self-generated picture is totally inappropriate. The text is wooden. It's correct in syntax, but it's wooden. And she said, as a doctor, I don't, and that's the reason why you even advertise to doctors as a pharmaceutical company. She says it doesn't appeal to me at all.
Yeah.
What's your take on that? Either in this context or another context, do you see certain, and I guess the film industry would be another topic. Do you see AI killing certain industries? Are we going to see the bye-bye of the Kodaks and the Xeroxes, and is there a new death toll for certain industries?
Yeah, well, there's various research papers around that do suggest that. But for me, as an optimist, I also know that it's a continuum of impact, isn't it? Because I had the great honor recently to be on a panel that was exploring the implications of artificial intelligence on creativity and the artist impression. And I was there as the social science futurist type perspective. And there were people on the panel that were really awesome, amazing artists. And there were people there from a range of different perspectives, including from our First Nations people here. And we were talking about, well, what does it mean, even from the perspective of image generation with artificial intelligence, and where is the line in terms of intellectual or cultural ownership of images and symbols and those processes? And it was really, on our group, we had people who were polar opposite, which makes a good panel. There were artists who knew that as part of their process over the last 20 years had been prolifically showing images of their work online, which theoretically means that if we're thinking artificial intelligence needs to harvest images from somewhere, that there's already a massive bank and stock of images that's there for it to take access of, even if it doesn't necessarily have the right to necessarily. And then what happens if there is an AI generated piece of work that is utilizing a unique form, a unique symbol? Where's the line in terms of intellectual property? So I sort of also see it varies a bit in the marketing area as well, in that context. So yeah, in the area of marketing, I think it's a little bit similar to the challenge for artists and other creatives, because often people who are drawn to marketing go for a variety of perspectives. There's those that love the creative and the design process. There's those that like the creativity and the messaging to get an outcome for the client that they're actually working for. And at the moment, a full replacement of a marketing team is probably not the smartest move, given that artificial intelligence at the moment is not a fully inclusive set of information. There's been test cases to demonstrate that AI can bring a bias. I know there are many people trying to work on ways to soften off those bias elements, but what we're really wanting to keep as part of the process, regardless of who generates the copy, for want of a better word.
You're alluding to something that's incredibly important. I almost want to put that a little bit towards the back, but let's address it. I think you're talking about this concept of integrity, because every human being is also a sum of their experiences and their biases and their social background and their conditioning and stuff like that, and that plays into the classical concept of logical fallacies and stuff like that. And that I think that's definitely an important topic. But I'd like to kind of go back to, because we started off with the concept of art and artists, and also marketing and marketeers and marketing. I think and I'd like to hear your opinion on it. At the moment, originally, I think, like many people, my assumption was, it's going to replace us, because we have this kind of Hollywood-esque understanding of artificial intelligence that from one moment to the other, we've got a robot like Arnold Schwarzenegger who does everything better, faster, smarter than us. I think we're a long way away from that. But so this is an interpretation I have, and I'd like to hear your take on it. I think if you look at the history of mankind, okay, and this is going to be a weird way to analyze it, the advancement of our industrialization has always been contingent on labor force. Okay, the having sufficient units of capacity that can transform inputs into outputs. And that's why also, if you look at the history of humanity, there's been eras of slavery. There's even, unfortunately, if you look today, there's also still a huge amount of exploitation. And I think one thing that technology, this might be the upside of technology, one thing that technology does, it creates a democratization of possibilities so that because think about how long it would take for these 10,000 hours, that's much more than that I would have to do to be able to paint like a good professional, or play a violin like Itzhak Rabin, right? And these new technologies enable Tom, Dick, and Harry and Mary, okay, to be equally creative. And I think that's an interesting take. So from our present perspective of AI understanding, I just understand AI as an accelerated mechanism or tool to get things done faster. And it creates democratization, because how often have you or any one of us, when you're, I don't know, decorating your house, you say, I want to have a painting and I have an idea what it looks like. But just think of the process that you would have to get through to get that in that quality. You wouldn't have to find an artist. You'd have to negotiate with them. It costs you a lot of money. It would take a lot of time. And now you can sit down in AI, right? What's the tools that Midjourney? Are you familiar with Midjourney?
Yes.
My film team has been using Midjourney. They're hooked on it. They're like great. So would you see that? I think at this level of maturity, what we're talking about, AI development, it's just an acceleration tool. Would you agree with that?
I could support that view, but I also still am very mindful that technology can enable cross-skilling opportunities, but technology can also lead to further discrimination and inequity. So it's like it can be a leveler. And certainly I do a lot of work with people with a disability and their families, and people who may even have forms of learning difficulties such as dyslexia, etc. And so I can see how artificial intelligence could be incredibly powerful to sort of help be an additional enabler for
help them overcome handicaps, maybe.
Yeah, but in Australia, as a classic example, like we're a very large continent, we've got parts of our country that still don't have reliable access to the internet.
So that's another issue.
It still brings in the whole concept of
it's creating a new class of haves and have-nots, right?
Yeah, well, that's the risk. And one of my clients that does work with people with a disability and their families, during the COVID period of time, they had an incredible project that actually started to get people up on technology. And this wasn't artificial intelligence necessarily, but it was even having reliable data, even having a reliable device.
Yeah,
and then, of course, the digital literacy to be able to understand how to navigate these systems, but also how to protect themselves, their passwords. So some of those core sort of things that many people, including many people who listen to this podcast, take for granted, but it's still something that for me we can get caught in the glamour of the exciting new opportunity, and there's plenty of opportunity, but we also need to make sure that we're not leaving anyone behind.
You're talking. This is gold again. This is equity issue, but before I want to go to we can go to the equity issue now and deep dive on it. But before we do that, I want to kind of finalize the last topic and put it maybe into context. Does a marketeer have to worry about his or her job? Does a musician have to worry about his or her job? Does an actor have to worry about his or her job?
I think I would probably say worry is the wrong word.
Okay. What would be the word you would use?
I would use the word that regardless of the industry that I'm in, I need to be awake to what the potential implications could be, but also have the right mindset, which means that regardless of the outcome, that there's still a place for the things that make me feel passionate about. So think of, I know it's an old model, Maslow's hierarchy of needs and self-actualization is all about passion and purpose, and it's from the 40s, but it's still very contemporary, that artificial intelligence is a concept that could take the marketeer's role, is going to basically affect the very base of the triangle, right? Which is all about survival and physical requirements. And I wrote a paper on this as part of my doctoral studies. And people's fears and concerns sort of were really hierarchical in nature, from that self-actualization perspective, from passion. Some of the people that I've spoken to recently, again, from a mindset perspective, are seeing AI as a tool to broaden creativity, while others are seeing it as a negative, it's going to stop my creative process. So we've got this sort of polar perspective, but that's why I think it's not, do I worry about my role, or do I just get ready to try and continue the things that make me feel really passionate, and theoretically work out how I'm going to work in this new AI influence context.
Well, I love your very positive take on it. I think it's so important. If I may, I'd like to call it back to you and see if I'm covering what you're saying. You kind of make me think of a podcast that I did recently with a very good friend of mine, also a brilliant consultant who has a very diverse background. He was a lecturer. He was leading he was lecturer and professor on digitalization for a long time, and now he's gone back into consulting. But we were talking about disruption in technology, and one of the things he says is, look, time doesn't stop for anybody. Technology is going to disrupt us whether we want it or not. And he says every evolution in technology provides an upgrade and a downgrade. Okay? He says, the possibility of online learning creates a downgrade factor for potential university professors. People are no longer interested in listening to boring professors who just do one slide after the other. Right? Not that we or all of them are like that. There's many of exceptions, but you know what I'm talking about. This negative stereotype. And he said, but if you're open, and I think this is the brilliance of our societal structure and technology, is if you embrace the new technology, it will provide you with and you were referring to the Maslow's pyramid. It will provide you with a means to maybe move up the pyramid and still do. I'll put it very directly. I don't believe that marketeers have to worry about losing their job, because a non-marketeer is not in the position to understand what good text is or good formatting. Yes, you can do a lot of that with AI, but there is still a need for competence, human competence. And if you look at AI as a tool, at least at this stage, maybe later it'll be different. You're going from a hammer and a chisel to maybe a mechanized hydraulic thing, but it's still the artist. It's still so my statement, or maybe also question to you: does human genius still matter in the burgeoning concept of AI? Are we still relevant?
I think so. I definitely think so. And I think that, I honestly believe that there will be industries that will be disrupted. And I did a talk recently which quoted a bit of Gartner research about where they're suggesting that by 2030, that 80% of a project manager's role could theoretically be done by an AI augmented piece of software. And for project managers, hearing that statistic, they could go, oh, gosh. But as we know, from our tried and tested experience, that the elements that project managers really want to get into, which we often don't have time to do, is the relational stuff.
The 80% is the pain in the butt stuff. It's the 80%.
More time.
Setting up meetings, writing protocols. Not that that's the only thing we're reduced to, but there's a lot of menial work in project management that if you don't do it, you don't have flow. But it's just time consuming.
Yeah, but I do sometimes feel that for people wanting to enter into project management areas, which often starts with an administrator, like maybe a project support person or administrator, that those jobs probably will be initially right for AI assistance, because we'll have a system that will be able to, do a range of different things for us, such as maybe it can handle daily task management, or maybe
let's do a list of pragmatic things, because I've heard that. I actually have it's funny too, because I bought a book from Amazon. I have to look who it's from. I don't know if it's any good, but it's about this thick.
Right.
on how AI will impact project management. So let's take it as a context example of where do you see pragmatic examples of AI revolutionizing and accelerating our project management work?
Yeah. There's a number of different areas. Some of those for me will be in concepts such as complex project analytics. That if we sort of set the parameters correctly, that AI will be a genius with that. If we have the
crunching
right
data, right?
Yeah, punching the data. That whole concept around workflow and even project prioritization at the portfolio level would be very right for some form of analytic assistant. Some of the sort of, let's call them critical but sort of lower roles, such as even a virtual assistant, someone to take minutes and transcribe meetings. That's already something that we do now.
Maybe even to do a dashboard for your steering committee. Now you have to spend hours doing in Power BI or whatever the tool is that you do.
Yeah, general communications out to project team, on a sporadic basis. Get your reports in, once a fortnightly.
But not only to do the menial work, but to also say, listen, I want you to compare this data to this data from this time to this time. So it's a little bit of a higher form of intelligence than just
totally.
create me a bubble diagram.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Like I personally think that in the future, the sponsor or the decision makers in projects will essentially have, with artificial intelligence, receive real-time overviews of information and then be able to be flagged to the areas that they need to respond to. Or sponsors will be able to work with project managers and look at options analysis that AI might help generate. And then the sponsor hopefully will still make the decision based on a percentage likelihood of success on a get back to green plan, for example. And then the AI solution will update plans and registers and communicate the next action. So all of that, I believe, is really possible.
Theoretically, you could do, health assessments on projects. How completely is it documented? Do we have the data points that we need? Is it on course? Do we have conflicting requirements? If we look at the classical issue of configuration management, that you get early warn flags. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me ask you. Go ahead.
And in some contexts where we do the same sorts of projects over and over, like, for example, the building industry or the construction industry, where they're building lots of the same sort of, housing developments, for example, well, then artificial intelligence could whip up your base schedule based on looking at a reference class of material, and then you've passed that off to a project manager as a first iteration, including budgets and cost estimates.
So it'll actually just,
but not yet.
Yeah. When you were talking, I realized something. I think the last 10 to 20 years, I think one of the huge topics, just also based on our technology capability, has been the subject matter of big data. And I love the concept of big data, but my first statement on big data is, I'm going to give you a weird example. Many, many years ago, I was managing a startup company that produced control systems for controlling liquor in bars. Okay. And it was a real-time system where, because I don't know if you're familiar with the term shrinkage, but they say that shrinkage in a bar, which means alcohol that's poured out but not billed, is about somewhere around 38 to 40%, which is a lot of money, right? So I remember when I was, pitching this product to particular clubs and bars, they would say, "Yeah, but we have video cameras." And I said, "Well, how many video cameras?" We have 20 video cameras. I said, "Well, how long do you film?" Well, 10 hours. So you have 20 video cameras that film 10 hours. That's big data. Says, and you sit down afterwards and look at all that? They go, "No, I said, so
Yeah.
the biggest problem with big data in our technological development is we have so much data that there's no way to crunch it. And actually, if we were to look at it as the additional app or plugin, artificial intelligence is now the thing that can make big data relevant because it does something that we can't do. We can crunch big data much faster than we can and can flag relevant things. So this would be a potential, whether it be for administrative things in governments, whether it be in construction, cross-referencing, whether it's in project management or communicating with higher ups to make quicker decisions. It gives, because what good does it do for you as an organization if you have a lot of data but you can't access it? You can't put it.
I agree.
We always say the difference between data and information is supposed to be intelligent. Right?
Yeah. Like I see big data in AI as like it's a sort of, I don't know, symbiotic relationship, synergistic relationship.
Yep.
There's a good word.
Yep.
And basically big data analytics needs to leverage AI for better data analytics.
Yep.
But AI requires a massive scale of quality information and data to learn, improve decision-making processes. And with the ultimate aim, I guess, of hopefully of your investment in artificial intelligence is to make faster and better and data-driven decisions, and hopefully have a greater impact through the process. But I just think that the data that we have is not necessarily always held by the organization either. And this is back to your concept about marketing, for example. That market insights that are generated by the group. Imagine a credit card company where every time I go and pay, like today, pay for my lunch with my credit card, there's that bit of data that comes through and processes and says that Elissa had lovely Vietnamese for lunch today. And so therefore, big data is all about the volume, but it's also about the velocity and the variety of data that comes through the process. And then AI needing to be sensibly parametered to be able to make meaning without it, again, from an ethics perspective, potentially put two lots of information together and say Elissa only ever eats Vietnamese.
I think people who've been studying intelligence in the last decades have always kind of differentiated. Tools have. I mean, if we're going to use a simple example like MS Project or Primavera or whatever, I mean, a lot of people say, "What's the value of that?" Well, the value of those systems is that they're much faster than we are, right? Yeah. If your input is correct, right? You put in relevant input and you push on a button. And I don't know, you're calculating value flow or you're calculating network diagrams, and you have a change request, you can, within seconds, calculate what the impact theoretically would be.
Yes.
Okay, with a certain level of veracity, which it would take you hours, days, if not weeks to do as a human being. I think what human beings have always felt comfortable with is to say, well, yeah, but those systems are fast, but they're stupid. Without us, they can't subsist. I think the fear that a lot of people have now with artificial intelligence is artificial intelligence coming for our lunch. But we can discuss that. But there were two other questions or comments that kind of tied into what you were talking about, how the value of the kind of the symbiotic relationship between AI and big data, which I think is a great beacon of hope for us, because otherwise we'll never be able to crunch that data and we will never have the true value of it. I'm a big proponent. One of the things that I do on a consulting level is I've over the last 30 years been helping creating PMOs, and I'm an adamant advocate for PMOs. Do all my PMO clients now have to worry with artificial intelligence that they're going to lose their job?
I would think that for small projects, the PMO may have a less of a role, but still for those more complex initiatives, I think it will end up being hybrid.
Can we go back to your Maslow pyramid to give PMOs hope?
Yeah, well, I personally think PMO teams who are very multifaceted. I've stood up quite a few PMOs in my time. That it just means that the artificial intelligence function and process that will take over certain PMO roles into the future will mean that PMO services they can service maybe more projects.
They're more powerful.
Human team members
their capacity is augmented through artificial intelligence.
Yeah,
they're spending less downtime with the administrative part of it. Yeah. So So it's an acceleration tool.
It's that shift. Yeah, acceleration tool. It will only work if it's going to be something that will bring a form of advantage. But for me, it means a PMO, for example, could easily start to then spend more time from a validation and verification of information lens, maybe even an assurance lens.
And maybe also implementing in strategy and stuff like that. So let me ask you another question, because this is a question that I have, and I'm hoping that a lot of PMOs have this question too. They said, okay, it's here, it's not going away. I might feel a little bit out of my depth. I might feel like there's a generational gap. Am I still relevant? Can I still learn? I still think that we older people can still learn. I think that I don't think that's an issue. Let's use this context example of PMO. If I'm a PMO in a large organization, right, and I say AI is relevant, everybody's hearing about it. They have assumptions about it, but nobody, as usual, knows where to start. Where would a PMO start if I want to get ahead of the ball, right? As a PMO, and don't want to wait for somebody to start questioning my relevance. But I said, okay, I want to buy into this technology. I want to be ahead of everybody. Where would be a good place for a PMO director to begin? Because, to implement AI requires technical software, system approaches, organizational thinking. Where would be a good place for a PMO director for a large company to begin to start putting their big toe into the big pool of AI?
Yeah. Well, for me, the biggest question that I challenge my clients with who are thinking of these same components is to really determine what we do not want artificial intelligence to do for us. And so that is where I would start. Because over time is that artificial intelligence as an instance may be able to do a number of, we talked earlier about a wide range of different roles that PMOs do that in time artificial intelligence could do, support features, data analysis, scheduling, dependency management, writing reports,
doing protocols for meetings,
data analytics. And so for me, it's the decision of what do we not want AI to do in our PMO context, and what do we want to remain with, either on that continuum, a fully human service if we've got capacity, or something that will say, well, what is, as I call it in my doctoral research, the human to AI ratio that we think will work best in our situations. And I like to think of many organizations, especially of scale, if they're making a deliberate choice, there might be parts of the organization operating model that will be fully artificial intelligence. It will be AI working with AI to provide services and functions. But then there is a deliberate choice about, well, maybe we still need the artisans. Who do you want to make your sourdough bread in the morning? Do you want a baker who's got a lot of experience? Or do you want an AI to sort of go with the packet mix and do the kneading and the process? So it ends up being, for me, any PMO lead is to think, well, where are the areas that I need to get the greatest traction and value for my business? What's the proportion of PMO efficiency benefits that maybe we can reallocate to doing more exciting projects in the good of our company or good of the community? And then what are the elements we really do not want AI to do, which is probably, do you want to sack people or make them redundant with AI just automatically generating, or a chatbot having that communication? Or is that something that maybe we want to keep the human to human interaction.
Is this your social background speaking?
Well, this is my perspective of what's come through my research. Is one of the biggest sort of components from a guiding principles perspective is that people wanted to maintain not just a process and interface efficiency lens. They wanted to also make sure that human dignity and empathy was maintained as part of the value proposition. Which may rub against some of the values of organizations who are for profit and only are driven by economic lenses, as opposed to, well, should we do this? It's just a provocation.
You're not surprising me, because I've looked at your website. I know you a little bit, but you are moving me. I have to say I'm profoundly impressed with what you're saying. I didn't expect you to go there. Maybe to use contextual language that we often use in project management, the two bingo words we often use in project management is the concept of framework, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to refer to just framework that we have in the PMBOK guide, but I'm talking. What I like about the framework is kind of process, structure, organizational elements. It's kind of the bricks and mortar that you need. And then a lot of people talk about fundamentals, or they talk about foundational concepts. And I think the most powerful thing also in the PMBOK guide is not all the framework stuff. It's valuable, but you can learn it fairly quickly. I think the true profundity of the PMBOK guide is in the foundational concepts. And I often find that they're kind of, like when you have a dog and you have to give your dog a pill, you put it into a cookie and jam it in. I think in the PMBOK guide, a lot of the foundational concepts that are really, really important are being missed. And so let me give you my definition. For me, the foundation is like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. You can have a beautiful building, but if your foundation sucks, your building might be beautiful, but it's going to have, it's going to be at a tilt. And I absolutely love, and I'm totally impressed, and kudos to you, that when I was actually looking for kind of a process answer, you said, no, Mark, we need to start at a foundational level. And I couldn't agree with you more, and power to you. I will say that one of the things that popped out on your website, which made me smile, and I said, if she believes this, I'm totally impressed with this woman. You have a kind of a value statement on there that says, right at the beginning, it says, Elissa believes organizations can be a force for good. Mm-hmm. Okay. And you've confirmed that for me. I think in this classical world where a lot of that is lip service, when we're talking about CSR and a lot of people like to say that, we're green, we're schmeen. I don't know. Have you seen the recent video of Apple?
No, I haven't.
You have to look. You have to look at. I saw it on LinkedIn. They hired a well-known actress to play Mother Nature. And they have this board meeting where all the people in the board are different ages and different ethnic groups. They're very diverse. And they're doing this report on corporate social responsibility and how they're going to be emissions free and stuff like that, which I thought was all wonderful. For us cynics, I could ask a bunch of questions that would probably hurt if they had to answer them. What are they doing to relieve child labor and slave labor in lithium mines? How does it look when it comes to their, where they have how many people, what's the suicide rate at the moment in the factories in China? These would be elements. But for you, you've proven to me you don't just do lip service. You actually believe it. I think that's a great place to start. So you have this also, you have this mentality. You need to identify your principles before you go on the journey. Is that kind of your approach to AI?
Yes, it is, and that was for me. My research process involved people from the end user's perspective.
Yes,
and so because of, again, from you can work out, I've got this social science background. I really care about people, and care about the community, and care about our planet. But I also am very mindful of that sometimes. When people set up their prioritization frameworks in their organizations, that they forget about that sort of deeper level, that deeper sort of sounds a bit esoteric, a little philosophical.
No, it's important
level.
Because if you don't have that, if you don't have the why, if you don't have the compass, and you just focus on the what, ultimately what happens in a capitalistic society or an efficiency driven, you're going to sacrifice what matters for what's faster and cheaper.
Because you can, right? And that's the glamour, and that's what vendors, often, oh, this will be faster, and oh, save you lots of money and speed up your time and processing. And that's the part of the dominant narrative. And I deliberately in my research, I didn't want to talk to developers, AI developers. I wanted to talk to decision makers and those who would be impacted by AI.
Okay.
And so it meant that the output that I got came from the people who will be concerned that what does this mean for my livelihood?
So we're not creating a Little Shop of Horrors. I don't know if you're familiar with that musical.
Yeah.
So we don't have that feed me Seymour situation.
Yeah. And one of the pieces of work that I did with participants was, as I mentioned earlier, like this whole exploration around mindset. And I used the concepts that many people have heard of before, Carol Dweck's fixed and growth mindset concepts. And I gave them the scenario of saying, oh, your job's going to be taken with AI, and got them to
Well, there's going to be a downgrade, but hopefully there'll be an upgrade. And maybe the upgrade will be much better than the downgrade.
But Mark, the incredible thing was just the difference in people's perspectives about even what their image of the future was, and the words and feelings that were associated with that when they actually put themselves in more of a growth mindset, which is about, thinking about learning and opportunity, as opposed to fixed, which is, my family's doomed. And people were drawing like images of the future, which included death. Like it was incredible, but people were saying, well, if I lose this, I'm going to broken homes, broken families. So that got me thinking, this is affecting the very base of Maslow, based on the mindset that people have. So I want people to be more resilient into the future, to be more aware of the choices and options, which is why my view of like, does the marketer, should they be worried? I'm going, well, if you have the right mindset and attitude, you'll be able to overcome things.
If you're not willing to grow, then you need to worry. If you're not willing to grow, you won't be. I mean, exactly. I studied marketing 30 years ago, and I remember for decades nothing changed. I think the first one who slowly rattled the cage of marketing was Seth Godin, but primarily from a conceptual paradigm perspective. Mm-hmm. And quite honestly, I think still a lot of the things and models that I learned in marketing way back when are still relevant today. But quite honestly, they're just a marginal part of what you would need to know from an operational perspective. And there's no harm in that. I think there's a beauty that there's an evolution that we never stop learning. Yeah. So we there's a couple more topics I want to maybe, so that we can look at it from one other context. We kind of alluded to medical. I think medical is an interesting example of feel-good possibilities of AI. Can you kind of expand on what you know about what technologies might or are evolving or might evolve in the medical field that will create positive impact for society?
Yeah. I think partly, again, going back to the fact that there's a number of subdisciplines in artificial intelligence, including sort of robotic disciplines, that healthcare at the moment, in particular from the concept of diagnosis, is being rapidly sped up in terms of not only the ability to diagnose, but also to be able to pull on a global pool of data, and particularly in areas like cancer research and other areas where people can basically, based on your pathology plugged into a system, can produce not necessarily will the cancer come back or not, but at least an indicator, which then can sort of lead people to make different choices about their health and wellness moving forward.
Well, I think if we go back to the big data factor, I think one of the things that artificial intelligence can do is can link cross-link a bunch of different data points that an individual might lose if you're going to multiple physicians. I think somebody once told me that I don't know if it was Facebook, but one of the social medias they have artificial intelligence that can identify faster than you, whether you or any professional, whether you have depression or not, just by the posts you do or what you look at, or how long whether you're suicidal and whether,
and certainly in Australia, since we're, sunny Queensland, high incidence of skin cancer, image
melanomas.
Recognition, the ability to sort of essentially
to be able to take your smartphone and just take a picture of it and it says, hey, it's this and that. And
and in the operating theatres where human surgeons will be augmented by artificial intelligence,
for micro
and even the whole concepts of
and
for
very
nanobots
dangerous
or other words. It sounds crazy, but it's really starting to assist, and then combined with some of those other sort of at times seen reasonably controversial about genetic sort of coding and CRISPR and those concepts, meaning that sometimes it can say, well, maybe we can sort of solve this problem completely. And that gets us onto a topic we need a glass of wine to have around pharmaceuticals place in all of that.
There's another thing I noted down earlier. I think right now, one of the feedbacks, I've forgotten who I was listening to. I was listening to some AI expert, and it was a guy who was at Harvard and then at MIT. I'll think of his name in just a moment. He was on another podcast, and he was talking about the beauty of AI. And he says, right now, what are the limitations of AI? And he says the present limitation is that it is not independently intelligent, which means if you give artificial intelligence the responsibility to calculate an algorithm or kind of decide, the only way it can come up with a solution is if that element of the solution or the solution has already been aggregated in the system. Which kind of goes back to that statement I said, if you ask ChatGPT to give you statistics on something, it'll say, well, I only have the data up until 2021, right? So that would I think that's an indication of if you're going to put it into stages, again, a lower level of evolution of artificial intelligence. Would you dare to give a prognosis when artificial intelligence and how many years artificial intelligence will be to, I don't know if you want to call it sentience or cognitive ability, when it will be able to, in the absence of certain data points, be able to be truly creative? Because I think creativity is one element of intelligence where human beings have just always had an advantage on systems. Do you foresee a time period where AI will challenge us there as well?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily want to put a time period on it, because I think in our current context on this planet, there's other matters that also might disrupt any prediction to do with our climate crisis, and the modelling that AI is clearly helping with as well. But I would not be surprised if there may be instances that may already exist somewhere that people aren't talking about, but I would certainly think from an AI taking over, the being truly creative, creativity is definitely in the eye of the beholder. As you mentioned, looking at the images that AI can create at the moment, that could be perceived by many people to be a form of creativity, and some of the art that has recently been purchased that was AI generated went for millions of dollars, before people realized what it was. So, it is quite a challenging
So
concept.
You're saying there's a spectrum for creativity, to use the buzzword.
I would say so. And again, like if you and I went to the same art gallery, you would like things that I might not like. So it challenges that concept of creativity. But one of the amazing people I've spoken to recently is a prolific artist. She uses AI as just a thought bubble promoter, a bit of a promoter of ideas, and then she'll go on totally different tangents that she never even dreamed possible because of AI being almost like a suggestion.
I appreciate that pushback, and I hear you, and I think that's a valid point that I hadn't thought of. Since you mentioned it, simulations is something that we've been doing since we've had IT.
Mm.
be it, I don't know, military games. Can you foresee AI maybe helping us with the climate issue by
I
running
think it already
simulations?
is. Yeah, I think it already is. And I've seen some examples of AI modeling, even in terms of predictions around polar ice cap freezer levels, for example, being utilized by scientists to look at images that have been collected of the same sort of, national park, for example, for years, and then seeing the sort of degradation or the changes to water quality over time from these longitudinal studies. So I think AI is already having a role there, and robotics combined with modern forms of agriculture is also having a role there around even the breeding programs of cattle or other sort of domestic animals.
I know that the
apologies to the vegans, but also
the agricultural university
production
here in Vienna has a amazing state of the art where they use drones that fly out of the forests, and they can identify exactly in what stage every tree is and whether the composition of the woods, and depending on temperature and what they have to plant and what they have to harvest. It's amazing what's out there. Let me ask you one more pragmatic question, because I often feel my job, maybe this is I'm paying homage to my father, who's unfortunately passed, but my father was a senior executive, was very, very bright, very, very ambitious, very, very driven. But I always loved him for his very pragmatic questions. So I always have the feeling that I think part of my job is to kind of channel those board members who only have a certain attention span for stuff and don't want to get into all the details. They want to dabble a little bit. They want to hear. But at the end of the day, they want to say, okay, well, enough talk. What are we going to do about it? I wouldn't want to exclude small companies, but let's just say, let's focus on mid to large that might have the budget and the structure to support it. If I'm a board member, if I'm a CEO, a CTO, a CIO, who needs to be who needs to be in the driver's seat when it comes to AI? Do I need to hire somebody? Do I give it to my CIO? Who needs to?
Yeah, personally, if I had full power over that choice, I would love a panel.
So a panel
of advisors that include
external or internal.
I would sort of say a mixture of both. That I know that some of those larger companies have got, incredible sort of subject matter experts that exist within the organization who have depths of different expertise. I also think that what I would love would be to make sure that there may be some validated vendor affiliations that would be of useful, but validated vendor affiliations or software, companies that basically we understand their funding sources and any potential conflicts of interest. So the choice of like the expert at the moment is I would think that the best way to cover and provide good guidance is to have a panel of different voices, including the sort of end user perspective, the technologist perspective, an ethical perspective, and also just the perspective of someone who's pragmatic from the change management journey as well. So it is
So
it is like a little panel.
You're kind of advocating what I call the multidimensionality of matrix organizations. I think for anybody who's ever, when they did their PMP, they remember matrix organization. And they always think that a matrix organization is two-dimensional. You have the functional line organization with vertical and horizontal distribution of responsibility, and then only the project management organization works across, which is hogwash because you have change organizations. Okay, so you have operational excellence. You have CSR, which is also a cross-functional topic, and I would agree with you. I think that AI, if you're gonna maximize the possibility of it, I like your approach of having internal, external, kind of using similar framework to what already exists. Maybe having a steering committee kind of concept.
Like it's an extension, Mark, of like a lot of large corporations have groups in Australia. We call them like risk and audit committees, which may have an independent director as part of those. And for me, it would be like essentially an extension of a group like that, because artificial intelligence as part of our operating models brings new risks that are still untested in a lot of circumstances. So what if the scenario is that we've got an AI solution that makes a choice about someone, receiving a service or not, and then that person is told no, but it's actually incorrect, and then that person, has a negative reaction in some regards, either, and there's been case studies of this nature where people blame the staff member. I think this happened in the UK around postal workers, saying, postal workers were bad, and people actually lost their homes and livelihood. But it then ended up being determined that it wasn't the postal person making the decision. It was a wrong code within a piece of software. So I just want to make sure that you've got from a risk lens and
I definitely that's our last topic that we're not going to jump across. We need to look at the dangers and the opportunities. But that's great pragmatic feedback for executives listening to this podcast. And we can shamelessly plug here. That's one of your core businesses, isn't it?
Yeah, it is certainly one of my
so
roles.
If for anybody who says, you know what, I like this Dr. Farrow woman, can I book her? You might have to work across time zones, but you travel, right?
Yeah, I travel all the time. And one of the pragmatic voice that I bring, people enjoy, and also the ability to sort of match. It's more than just a profit. It's a true definition of benefits management, which is more than just a financial sort of economic lens. It's also that bringing in a broader societal and human and almost ecological lens at times as well to the decision-making process.
Is there
being a coach in the process?
Yeah. Is there some kind of professional association or society for AI that one can become a member of or link into, or is that too early for that?
No, there are a variety of different associations, but they connect more to the domains of the programmers and the coders.
Yeah. So it's more IT based.
International sort of electrical engineers, and they'll have disciplines and streams around artificial intelligence. But I think it's something that especially project managers and change managers and business analysts need to have a bit of an understanding of, which is why, from my perspective, we don't just be a blind robot implementing a new system. Ask some of these deeper questions in the forming up of the business case.
Yeah. I'm all pumped about the topics. I have a total positive mindset. I'm almost hesitant, but it's I think if we're gonna speak fairly to the listeners of this podcast, there's been media out there, fears. There's been fear mongering. There's been discussions that the top AI gurus of the world, even I think Elon Musk, although quite honestly lately I question when he opens his mouth. Say that there needs to be a moratorium on the development. Ethics are not in place. Would you like to speak a little bit about that? What are some of the ethical issues we face, and what from your perspective needs to happen for an organization to manage these? I mean, you've kind of already alluded to it in talking about having a solid principle based and vision based of what you want to do with AI. But what are some of the fears that we all face in society with what AI is concerned, and how much of it is legitimate?
Yeah, well, I think any feeling is legitimate to the person who's feeling it. Yeah. That's one of my big elements from my early career in domestic and family violence prevention, is that feelings are real to the person that's feeling it. I just want to acknowledge that. But from my perspective, in particular, I guess the exploration that I did with participants about what their immediate sort of fear would be when it comes to artificial intelligence concepts, and I just thought I'd share some of these with you as well, just to sort of show the difference that when we talk about someone being more in a fixed mindset, which is an area where people don't necessarily see the sort of immediate sort of possibilities, and they might even think, oh, I can't learn, and, I'll never change, and this is it, that, oh gosh, AI is coming, oh, bummer, like, we've got to just deal with it. But some of the feelings that came up for the people in my doctoral studies were things of fear, anger, sadness. There was a lot of feelings also about the impact on their employment and job security. People thinking, well, I've got this job and this will never change, but suddenly it's in a disrupted industry. Some of the other negative feelings that people expressed to me through those processes were really worrying about the future and not able to make plans for the future. People feeling frightened and thinking about the negative implications on their family or even on their children. So some of these feelings are things that people today think about when it comes to the concept of our climate crisis that we're part of as well, especially younger generations who are thinking, well, what does this mean? Like, if I want to be an artist, but AI is producing all the art, like, where's my space?
You're talking at a very, very primal, but very base, but a very important level. I think when one does these Maslow pyramids, I think a lot of people say, the lower layers don't matter. No, they're just as valid as the top ones. If you don't have the bottom ones, then everything else on top.
Totally.
So this existential fear, do I still have a future? I think our younger generations, I think that's one big concern they have, right? Do I have a future? Does it even? Yeah, so we have all this technology, but is the world even going to exist for us in any form or fashion? So that's one element. But there's for companies, if I'm going to focus a little bit more on the risks and fears of companies, or maybe even society, I heard a statement that one of the things that AI will do will exponentially increase the amount of online fraud.
We're seeing it already, though, but that I think is just automation and digitization, not necessarily artificial intelligence. But AI is being used by clever and evil programmers
Hackers
to do the harvesting, and hackers are probably no longer one sort of clever person behind a computer with a bad intent. But AI can now be utilized. It is similar to what people are utilizing AI algorithms for their cryptocurrency sort of harvesting processes, that it's not one person madly sort of working on their crypto key and
interesting. So you're saying motive, ethics, personal inclination is something that determines so every human being has capabilities, but how you use those capabilities are kind of based on your mental mindset. So I guess AI has its mental mindset as well, and that's determined by whoever creates it.
In some circumstances, which is why I like this sort of ability to make sure that we have tested decision trees and data parameters, that are really tested from a range of scenarios before AI goes wild out there. I also think that there needs to be, in certain industries, the ability for users of the systems to have an opt-out process. So I want to speak to a human. Like, we've probably had this experience already. The chatbot is the sort of
we don't need AI to have ruined that concept. I mean, we have.
I want to speak to a person.
Terrible.
I wish we want to have that degree of dignity, choice, and control, and not be harmed from decisions that might be made by broken forms of tech.
I think that's important. I absolutely disagree with you. I think this whole concept of reducing FTEs or resource power to automate things like online banking is a valuable thing. But at the end of the day, if it's about something that's important, what's funny, I'm going to use a different example here. If you look at, for example, bakeries or supermarkets, you'll notice that they have a logical distribution of locations, because their opinion, their data tells them that if you're, I don't know, within 200 meters circumference of where you live, you can determine frequency, right? Which I think the point of sales aspect, and more important than the point of sales aspect, is the human interaction, is something that we cannot forget, I think if you look at how most banks are developing, I sometimes have the feeling they're trying to get rid of everybody that works for them. But quite honestly, I wouldn't feel comfortable having a bank as my primary bank if there's nobody I can go to talk to. I was tempted to say to go to complain to. But because I don't think artificial intelligence in many cases or automated systems are good at handling true complaints.
Yeah, well,
at least
because of that sort of nuances that actually happen, isn't it? And that's why for me, if I'm putting the challenge out to executives who think, I love AI, it's part of my system. Just be really clear on those ethical lenses. Like, agree on the ethical lens, agree on your guiding principles, agree on the areas that you do not want to sacrifice, which might be at the very heart of your value proposition, which might be that personalized touch.
So go ahead.
Oh, I was just thinking, for example, in aged care, do we want a robot delivering pills to your mother-in-law, or would you like a friendly face to come and deliver the pills to that person?
Yeah.
It's that choice and control, but also what are the areas that maybe, the laundry could be automated, but maybe not that sort of direct personal touch.
Now, I think what we're hearing, and I think this is the great part of it, is that there is still a huge aspect of self-determination for people and organizations to determine the ethical framework of their AI.
Yes. And there's not a lot of regulation yet.
Yeah, that's where I'm going. So the question is, because this is, if there's certain cultures that are famous for queuing, right? British cultures or Commonwealth country, they don't know how it is in Australia. They're famous. They know how to queue, right? Mm-hmm. We Americans are kind of second rate. Europeans suck at it, okay? But that's also historical based on it. But what I'm alluding to is there's a certain temptation of being unethical because in the short term, being unethical gives you a competitive advantage. Mm-hmm. That having been said, is there any safeguard to the quality of ethics framework or foundational concepts that companies give their AI? Is there, because I can't imagine that there's any regulatory board, and if we look at history, governments are terrible when it comes to dealing with legal issues in the internet. Mobbing, cyber mobbing. They're way behind the curve. Yeah. How are we looking for AI? Is there any hope of regulation? Do we want it? What form of regulation would there have to be?
Yeah, well, I think there needs to be some, and I know that the United Nations have put forward various principles and positions, and then a number of countries who are trying to grapple with this option are starting to put in forms of at least policy, which may not necessarily be legislated or regulated. I think there's a strong onus on those who create these machines and create AI to make sure that right from the source of whoever creates it, they have very strong ethical parameters in place, even just around the design of AI being good for humanity, as well. So at the moment, because of that, not one owner of this process, and because we've got national sovereignty and multi-layered governance that exists in these large groups like OpenAI, across the world, right? Like everyone, within certain parameters can
corporations have become bigger than governments. Probably.
Yeah. But then there's certain countries that, because of their political persuasions, don't allow you to use these forms of technology because of their own need to theoretically control their people or to at least influence their people. So it's a very complex area to even regulate, because there won't be like precedent necessarily globally, because everyone will have a slightly different interpretation of what that means. And also in terms of the take-up of AI, the ability to pay for experimental artificial intelligence, this takes money, takes time, takes things that many people at the moment, like affordable housing is a massive sort of issue in Australia at the moment, and AI is not going to solve that. Yeah.
Okay.
broader economic agendas and our climate crisis. And
So there'll
artificial
probably be
intelligence does bring waste.
national legislation that needs to be created. Then there'll be kind of either from the UN or there'll be some kind of collaborative. I think that's something that is still in the mix and will probably evolve.
Yeah, a bit like how various international tenants are signed up by various signatory countries. It will probably end up being something a little like that, and then some interpretation locally. But there's still these companies that sort of work, between the layers, and that's where the danger will come.
I had I forget, I think it was my third or fourth podcast. I had a friend of mine and colleague on who had a 30-year experience working with the UN in the UNIDO, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, and he says that that the new technologies have huge promise. He's a big fan. He's still very much young at heart and at mind, but he says it's going to create the concept of have and have-nots. Is almost being accelerated. He says the AI will create even bigger gaps and although I think we used to call them third world countries, I think we don't call them that anymore. We call them development countries. Have really picked up. They've really caught up. I think AI in many cases, if they would endorse it and use it, might accelerate their growth. But as you mentioned, depending on your bandwidth of internet, your political situation. This also has a huge potential from a societal perspective to create certain areas of the world that are haves and have-nots, right?
Yeah. And, knowing that for a smaller country who doesn't have their own lab or a serious lab at a university, such as MIT, et cetera, in the US, it means that they will have to pay some form of fee or subscription to utilize. But the control of the data that goes into these systems, a bit like ChatGPT, where's all this great data that people are uploading going? It's there, but it's also in this amazing cloud-based process. And a number of my clients here in Australia are telling their employees to say, use it, but use it with a sensible consideration. Don't upload confidential information. Project managers don't put your status report up there and ask it to do a grammar check on a controversial or confidential initiative.
With patent relative or sensitive issues. Or strategic sensitive issues.
It seems sort of sensible, but this is the part of the being literate about the future and also being digitally literate, but also acknowledging that cybersecurity, cyber risk is greater now than ever before because of our connectedness.
Great talk. You've given me lots of things to think about. One thing I also often like to ask my guests on the podcast, I don't always have as much time as I want to, but I'm still a great advocate of reading, since you're talking about literacy. Are there any particular books that you would recommend for people who say, hey, where's a good place to get started when it comes to becoming more literate with AI?
Yeah, one of the people that I met in Dubai, actually, you might have heard him speak as well, Mark, was Mo Gordat.
Okay, no, I thought you were talking. What's the Brazilian guy's name?
Oh, that guy. Yes, I can't remember his name.
He was a doctor.
Off the top of my head.
So Mo Gordat.
We'll find out. But Mo, so M-O is his first name, and Gordat, Gawdat. And he used to be the chief business officer for Google, and now has written a number of books, and he's released one called Scary Smart, which I really like. Because he sort of has lived in the tech world, but he's someone who really has hope for the future, but also wants people to be mindful. Yeah, 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 yeah. And for sorry, I've written a few papers as well, which I can make sure that yeah, 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 definitely can give you access to some of the ones that I've made reference to today. That are all my work's all published out there, and also I've been writing some articles recently with Dr. Harold Kersner about the implications of AI in the project context. So we've collaborated on a couple of pieces. He is, yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much.